Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans, for Ohio State fans. For the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, November 9th, 2025, and thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about Ohio State's 34-10 road win over Purdue yesterday. I'm also going to spend a little time looking ahead to Ohio State's next opponent, the UCLA Bruins, who visit the Horseshoe next Saturday night for a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kick on NBC. But first, let's revisit what I think many would call a workmanlike, maybe even a little boring 34-10 victory in Ross-Ade Stadium yesterday. Of course, we as Buckeye fans have the luxury of calling a road win over a Big Ten opponent boring, but I'd much prefer that over what Indiana and Oregon fans had to endure yesterday afternoon. More on that in a minute. Now, Ohio State was a little short-handed in this game. Star receiver Carnell Tate, starting right tackle Phillip Daniels, and reserve guard Josh Padilla, who's been rotating at right guard with Tegra Shabola, were all held out of this game. Tate and Daniels were in uniform, but Padilla actually did not make the trip to West Lafayette. He was on the availability report. Now, from what Ryan Day said in the postgame, it seemed like Tate could have played if needed, but Daniels was a little more of a long shot. Not sure he could have played if needed. Now, it doesn't appear that the injuries to Tate, Daniels, or Padilla are serious, and all three should eventually return, which is good news. Bryson Rogers got most of Tate's snaps and caught 2 balls for 30 yards. Ian Moore started at right tackle for Phillip Daniels and played well, especially in pass protection. Moore played 66 snaps and finished with the team's second highest PFF pass blocking grade of 77.1. This game got off to a bit of a goofy start, as they often do for the Buckeyes in Ross-Ade Stadium. Ohio State had a 70-yard touchdown run by Bo Jackson on their first play from scrimmage, nullified by a highly questionable penalty for a block in the back by Jeremiah Smith. On their only possession of the first quarter, they would be forced to punt for the only time in the game on that possession. Purdue would then counter with a 12-play, 70-yard scoring drive capped by a 40-yard field goal by Spencer Porath to give the Boilermakers a 3-0 lead heading into the second quarter. But the second quarter would belong to the Buckeyes. They went on a 24-0 run to take control of this game. Touchdown drives of 9 plays for 75 yards and 10 plays for 89 yards pushed the Ohio State lead out to 14-3. The latter was capped by a gorgeous 35-yard touchdown pass from Julian Sayin to Jeremiah Smith. Smith beat 2 Purdue defenders on the play, and Sayin dropped the ball perfectly into Smith's hands. Sayin's back foot was on the Purdue 45-yard line when he released the ball, which traveled about 50 yards on a frozen rope right into Smith's hands. Folks, throws like that are not supposed to look easy, but Sayin and Smith do something like that every single Saturday. It was a remarkable throw. With the Buckeyes leading 14-3 with 6:33 to play in the second quarter, Caleb Downs tipped a Ryan Brown pass that was intercepted by Jermaine Matthews, who returned it to the Purdue 30-yard line. 9 plays later, Lincoln Keenholz scored on a 3-yard touchdown run to put the Buckeyes up 21-3. It was good to see Keenholz get his opportunities in a special kind of a red zone package. Keenholz faked a handoff to C.J. Donaldson on the play, who then became his lead blocker to open up a hole on the right side, which allowed Keenholz to easily score on the play. That particular run play, the Buckeyes used to run probably 10 times a game with J.T. Barrett. It was Urban Meyer's security blanket. Now, it'll be interesting to see if that's a play Ryan Day and Brian Hartline will use again on November 29th in Ann Arbor, or possibly on December 6th in Indianapolis. Now, the third quarter was a weird one for the Ohio State offense. The Buckeyes outgained the Boilermakers 140-20 in that quarter. They had a 9-1 advantage in first downs. They only had one complete drive in that quarter. It went 15 plays for 68 yards and stalled at the Purdue 7-yard line on a highly uncharacteristic mental mistake by Julian Sayin. On 3rd and goal, Sayin committed the cardinal sin of throwing across his body to the middle of the field where the ball was intercepted in the end zone by Purdue defensive end C.J. Nunnally. It was Sayin's first interception in almost 2 months, and that was certainly a throw he'd love to have back. Now, the Buckeyes' only other possession of the third quarter started at the 3:50 mark and ended at the 12:41 mark of the fourth quarter. That drive went 11 plays for 58 yards. Ohio State had a 1st and 10 from the Purdue 14-yard line on that drive, but Julian Sain had a rare overthrow to a wide-open Max Clare in the end zone on first down. Then he took a 13-yard sack on third down, and the Buckeyes would have to settle for a 45-yard field goal by Jaden Fielding. So there was a little red zone wonkiness, which we've seen from time to time this season. In this game, it happened in the third and early fourth quarter, and that made the final score much more respectable, I think. I think if the Buckeyes are able to score in those red zone opportunities, this game, the final score would certainly look a lot more convincing. The Buckeyes would tack on one more score in the fourth quarter on a C.J. Donaldson 1-yard touchdown run. Then Ryan Day would empty his bench. The Purdue first-team offense would score their only touchdown in garbage time against Ohio State reserves, giving the Boilermakers the backdoor cover. It was the only time so far this season the Buckeyes did not cover. Ohio State is now 7-1-1 against the spread. Overall, it was still a dominating performance by the Buckeyes. The final score, again, wasn't really indicative of how lopsided the game actually was. The Buckeyes outgained Purdue 473 to 186. They dominated time of possession 40-53 to 1907. They ran 32 more plays than Purdue. They were plus 17 in first downs, and they were 9 of 13 on third down. And again, Purdue's only red zone trip was at garbage time against Ohio State reserves very late in the game. So as I like to do on Sundays, I'm going to tick down a short list of observations from this game. Then I'll finish with a quick preview of Ohio State's next opponent, the UCLA Bruins. Julian Sain had two throws in the second half that I'm sure he'd love to have back. They were both in the red zone. I've just mentioned them. The first was obviously the third quarter interception to C.J. Nunnally. The second, of course, was the overthrow to a wide open Max Clare in the end zone from the Purdue 14-yard line in the fourth quarter. Now, those were teachable moments for the young quarterback, to be sure, the interception most especially. But let's not forget, yesterday was only Sain's 9th career start. And the big lesson, of course, is you can't squander red zone opportunities at this time of the year. Mistakes like those against Michigan or in the postseason could cost Ohio State a game, could even end their season. But look, it's hard to quibble too much with the rest of Sain's performance in this game, especially when you consider he was without Carnell Tate. Sain finished 27 of 33 for 303 yards at 9.2 yards per attempt, one touchdown pass, and the interception. He spread the ball around to 9 different receivers, and he actually improved his overall completion percentage to 80.9%, which still leads the country by a very wide margin. Now, those 2 errant throws in the second half can't be dismissed. But look, that's life in the big city. As the starting quarterback at Ohio State, you're going to be graded on a completely different curve compared to everybody else. But I think Sain's Heisman candidacy is still very much alive. Now, whether Sain wins the award wasn't going to be decided in a game like this anyway. The outcome in Ann Arbor on November 29th and in Indianapolis on December 6th will determine that. But I think he played well enough yesterday to keep himself right in the thick of the race, despite Fernando Mendoza's late-game heroics in Happy Valley yesterday. I thought yesterday was probably Jeremiah Smith's best game of the season. With Carnell Tate on the sidelines all afternoon, Smith caught all 10 balls that were thrown his way. That's right, 10 catches on 10 targets for 137 yards and the 35-yard touchdown catch in the second quarter. Funny enough, Smith's best catch of the afternoon didn't count. Smith was tripped by a Purdue defender on the play, bobbled the ball, and caught it as he was falling down. I think this happened in the first quarter, maybe early second quarter. Purdue was flagged for a pass interference on the play, and the Buckeyes actually accepted the penalty. It looked to me like Smith had gained enough yardage for the first down on the play. I'm not sure why Ryan Day took the penalty. I would have let that play stand so Smith could get credit for it. It was another spectacular catch. With yesterday's performance, Smith made a big move on the leaderboard among the Big Ten's best receivers. He now leads the Big Ten in receptions with 65. He's tied for first in touchdown receptions with 10, and he's third in the conference in receiving yards with 862. From a national perspective, Smith is sixth in receptions and receiving yards, and he's second nationally in touchdown catches. Now, it helped both his Heisman and Biletnikoff cases that his own teammate, Carnell Tate, and Indiana's Elijah Surratt did not play yesterday. So now we're starting to see a path to at least an invitation to New York for Smith. And I would think at this stage, he's the leading candidate for the Biletnikoff Award. I mean, that's no disrespect to players like Danny Scudero of San Jose State and Skylar Bell of UConn. They're both, I'm sure, very good players. But Smith has been putting up his numbers against much better defenses on much bigger stages than those two. It was good to see Ohio State's young freshman running backs Bo Jackson and Isaiah West get the lion's share of the carries in this game. I had hoped we'd see more of West in this game than what we saw of him last week against Penn State, and we did. Jackson and West combined for 135 yards on 23 carries. It would have been a lot more than that if Jackson's 70-yard touchdown run in the first quarter hadn't been wiped out by that bogus block in the back penalty. And what stood out to me about both Jackson and West in this game was an ability to gain yards after contact. According to PFF, West led all Ohio State running backs in yards after contact per attempt. He averaged 4.56 yards after contact per attempt. That was 2.5 yards better than James Peoples and C.J. Donaldson, who only averaged 2 yards after contact per attempt in this game. Bo Jackson was second behind West at 3.69 yards after contact per attempt. Now, West still has a long way to go in pass protection. He had another whiff on Ohio State's first possession of the game that got Julian Sayin sacked and led to the Buckeyes' only punt of the game. I mean, I think it's clear West should not be in the game on passing downs. He's a total liability in pass protection, but he's probably their best back at running through contact and making the most of every carry. I'm looking forward to seeing more of West along with Jackson. As a team, the Buckeyes finished with 170 yards rushing on 43 carries at 4 yards per attempt. They also ran for 3 touchdowns. 2 of those were by C.J. Donaldson. The Buckeyes ran it 32 times for 164 yards at 5.1 yards per carry last Saturday against Penn State. Now, neither Purdue or Penn State is particularly good at stopping the run. Purdue is 93rd nationally in rush defense. Penn State is 83rd. Still, after struggling to run the ball against Illinois at 2.9 yards per carry and Wisconsin 3.5 yards per carry, the Buckeyes have shown some decent progress in the run game over these last 2 weeks. And I think we're starting to see a division of labor that works pretty well, with Jackson and West as RB1 and 2, C.J. Donaldson as the short yardage low red zone specialist, and then James Peoples is kind of an innings eater, right, who can keep Jackson fresh for what we think will be a postseason that'll extend well into January. So, I mean, look, the Buckeyes are at best a slightly above average rushing offense, but with the best passing game and the best defense in America, that's probably good enough. The Purdue offense only ran 44 plays yesterday, and 10 of those were on the garbage time touchdown drive late in the fourth quarter against Ohio State reserves. So the Buckeyes starting defense was only on the field for 34 plays in this game, and I think that explains kind of a weird box score. I mean, outside of Jermaine Matthews' second quarter interception, this game was almost entirely devoid of splash plays by the defense. According to PFF, the Buckeyes only had 6 quarterback pressures of Ryan Brown. They did not record a sack. They only had 3 tackles for loss. Peyton Pierce led the defense in tackles with 7. Once again, nose tackle Caden McDonald finished with the defense's highest overall PFF grade of 88.4. Again, McDonald is having an All-American season. He also finished with the unit's highest grade for rush defense of 89.3. Sonny Styles also graded out very well according to PFF with an overall grade of 82.9. The Buckeyes tackled really well again yesterday. According to PFF, there was only 1 missed tackle, and 14 different Buckeyes finished with tackling grades of 74 or higher. And 4 Buckeyes, Caleb Downs, Jalen McClain, Peyton Pierce, and Sonny Styles, all finished with tackling grades of over 80. It was not the sexiest performance by the Silver Bullets yesterday, to be sure, but it was still very effective. Only 4.2 yards per play for the Purdue offense. They were 3 of 9 on third down. And again, there was only 1 inconsequential red zone trip for Purdue, which came against Ohio State reserves at the end of the game. So on a day when the Big Ten's other CFP contenders, Indiana and Oregon, were both pushed to the brink of defeat on the road, the Buckeyes left little doubt in a drama-free blowout win that allowed them to give valuable reps to a lot of young players and rest a lot of their first-team players. Don't take that for granted, Buckeye fans. Winning at this time of year in the Big Ten isn't easy. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is. This, by the way, is the same Purdue team that went on the road just last Saturday and gave Michigan all they could handle in the Big House. But this game, yesterday, was over by halftime. So let's just pause and appreciate how this Ohio State team just brings it every week. They've been in 1 4-quarter game this season, which was the opener against Texas. Every game since has been a professional demolition of the opponent on both sides of the ball. The Buckeyes have made it look easy every single Saturday. It's very impressive. And again, don't take it for granted, Ohio State fans. Okay, let's turn our attention to next Saturday night. The UCLA Bruins will invade the Horseshoe for the first time since 1999. This game is a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kick on NBC. The early line is Ohio State minus 30.5. The over-under is 48.5. This will be the 10th meeting between these schools on the gridiron. The series is deadlocked at 4 with one tie. The last time these schools played was way back in 2001 in the Rose Bowl. That was a regular season game. That was also Jim Tressel's first season with the program. The Bruins won that game ugly, 13-6 in a defensive slog. And a guy by the name of Deshaun Foster was the Bruins' leading rusher in that game. Fast forward to 24 years later, Foster began this season as UCLA's head coach, but he was fired on September 14th after an 0-3 start, which included a 35-10 home loss to New Mexico. Interim head coach Tim Skipper will lead the Bruins into Ohio Stadium on Saturday night. Under Skipper, the Bruins actually put together a nice 3-game winning streak, which included a shocking 42-37 home win over number 7 Penn State. The Bruins also beat Michigan State in East Lansing and Maryland during that stretch. But UCLA has since dropped their last 2 games, which included a 56-6 beatdown at the hands of Indiana and a 28-21 home loss to Nebraska just last night. The Bruins will come into this game against the Buckeyes at 3-6 on the season. The UCLA offense is led by interim coordinator Jerry Neuheisel, the son of former UCLA head coach and Bruin quarterback Rick Neuheisel. The Bruins come into this game 103rd nationally in total offense. They're 85th in offensive yards per play. They're 116th in scoring offense. They're 110th in passing offense. And they're 61st in rushing offense. So they're a decent rushing offense, above average. Tennessee transfer quarterback Nico Iamaleava is the sun, moon, and stars for this UCLA offense. Iamaleava is both their leading passer and leading rusher. He comes into this game completing 64% of his passes at 6.4 yards per attempt. He has just over 1,600 yards passing with 12 touchdown passes and 7 picks. He's been sacked 22 times so far this season. Now, adjusted for sack yardage, Iamaleava has 610 rushing yards at 8.24 yards per attempt and 4 rushing touchdowns. In UCLA's win over Penn State earlier this season, Iamaleava ran for 128 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. It hasn't happened that often this season, but when Iamaleava is right, he can give UCLA a puncher's chance most Saturdays. He's really the only player on this Bruin offense the Buckeyes have to worry about. On defense, the Bruins aren't much better. They come into this game 77th nationally in total defense. They're 100th in defensive yards per play. They're 112th in scoring defense. They're 124th against the run. Now, they've been much better against the pass. The Bruins rank 27th nationally in pass defense. Keep your eye on 6th-year senior John Vaughns. Vaughns leads the Bruins in tackles with 88. That's good for 3rd in the Big Ten Conference, actually. The Bruins also have a good interior defensive lineman in senior defensive tackle Gary Smith III. Smith is their highest graded defender, according to PFF, with an overall grade of 78.4. Finally, keep your eye on sophomore cornerback Roderick Pleasant, the Oregon transfer. Pleasant leads the Bruins in PBUs with 7. He is also their 2nd highest graded defender, according to PFF, with an overall grade of 74.4. If UCLA had some decent skill around Nico Iamaleava and a competent defense, this could be a game, because Iamaleava is the type of athlete at quarterback that can make big plays outside of structure. I mean, he's the type of athlete that can be the antidote for a great defense. But I don't think he has nearly enough around him right now to make his athleticism really matter in this game. And with athletes like Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs patrolling the middle of the field, the Buckeyes, they're uniquely equipped to deal with an athlete like Iamaleava anyway. And with the numbers I just shared, it's hard to imagine the UCLA defense having much of a chance to slow down Julian Sand, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, and the Ohio State offense. So I'm setting my concernometer for this game at a 1. Again, the early line is Ohio State minus 30.5. The over-under is 48.5. UCLA has one of the worst rush defenses in the country. They rank 128th in opponent yards per carry, allowing just over 5 yards per rush. I think we're going to see just enough fireworks from the Ohio State passing attack to get control of this game. But then I'm expecting to see a healthy dose of the Ohio State rushing attack against this porous UCLA rush defense. I think we're going to see a lot of room to run for Bo Jackson and Isaiah West. I would not be surprised to see a similar result to what we watched yesterday in West Lafayette, with the Buckeyes dominating time of possession in this game. I don't think Ryan Day is going to put his starters at risk trying to make a statement in a game like this. I think Day is going to be coaching this game with one eye on November 29th and December 6th. I think he's going to try to win this game the surest way while also minimizing the risk of wear and tear and injury on his starters. I like the Buckeyes to win this one 41-13. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Look for a recap of the UCLA game along with a preview of Ohio State's next opponent, Rutgers, next Sunday afternoon. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks! You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.